Every generation has its spiritual luminaries, great sages who inspire us and lift us up. Sometimes these are living masters, and other times they are voices from the past who we access through their writings. One such great light lived over 200 years ago, but over the past 40 years has risen in prominence and popularity and is having a dramatic impact across the entire world. This individual, an outstanding Chassidic master, mystic, and visionary, is Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. Rebbe Nachman was a great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of the revivalist Chassidic movement. Nachman was born in his great-grandfather's house in Medjugorje, which is a town in the Ukraine, on April 4th, 1772. By the time he reached his bar mitzvah at the age of 13, he was already recognized as a genius and a future spiritual giant. He was married shortly afterward and began attracting a following by the time he turned 18. In the spring of 1798, he traveled to the Holy Land, and he arrived on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, one of the holiest days of the year. And after taking 4 steps, Rabbi Nachman said that he had accomplished his purpose for coming and he could go home. He ended up staying for 6 months and later said that more than anything else, this experience gave him his insights and his ideas. In 1802, Rabbi Nachman moved to Breslov and attracted his major protege, Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. 3 years later, Rabbi Nachman instructed Rav Nachman to begin arranging his teachings. Rabbi Nachman and his wife had 8 children, but 4 died in childhood. In 1806, his infant son died, and stricken with grief, Rabbi Nachman set out on a long, mysterious journey. During this time, his wife passed away, and he contracted the tuberculosis that would later take his life 3 years later. Rabbi Nachman's magnum opus is called the Likutei Moharan. It's a deeply profound and complex set of teachings, and it was first published in 1808. In 1810, a fire destroyed his house in Breslov, and he relocated to the small town of Uman, where a huge massacre of Jews had taken place in 1768. Tens of thousands of Jews refused to betray their faith, and they were slaughtered over the course of 3 days and buried in Uman in a mass grave. Rabbi Nachman spent 5 months teaching in Uman, and he passed away on October 16th, 1810, during the festival of Sukkot, at the age of 38. Rabbi Nachman held the group together and continued to publish the writings of Rabbi Nachman as well as his own teachings. Toward the end of his life, Rabbi Nachman wasn't sure that his students were fully grasping the depth of his teachings. So he began telling stories, fantasy stories, that served as parables to convey the essence of what he was seeking to teach. Rabbi Nachman's teachings focused on matters of faith, the importance of faith, on simplicity in life, on joy, on courage, on the importance of returning to God, teshuvah, repentance, and the importance of the land of Israel, among other topics. Rabbi Nachman was a passionate advocate for the practice of personal prayer. He called this hitbodedut, which means to set aside time each day to be alone. Lehitboded means to be isolated, to be alone. And Rabbi Nachman recommended that everyone set aside every day an hour, a half hour, to be alone, to go into the woods, or to lock yourself in a closet, and to speak to God in your own words. Rabbi Nachman wrote, Hitbodedus, meditation and personal prayer, is the highest level. It is greater than everything. During these sessions, you should tell God everything that you're feeling, all of your fears, all of your aspirations, all of your innermost thoughts. This is the ultimate way of coming closer to God and developing a more intimate relationship with God. Rabbi Nachman said, you should speak to God as you would speak to your closest friend. Rabbi Nachman emphasized the importance of truth and honesty in our relationship with God. For example, he writes in Likutei Moharan, Part 2, Chapter 68, when a person realizes that he's on a very low level and far from God, this itself is a reason to feel encouraged. Before this, he was so far from God that he didn't even know it. Now, at least, he knows it. And this itself is a sign that he is drawing closer. Rabbi Nachman has a similar paradoxical teaching in Likutei Moharan, Part 2, Chapter 12, where God's presence is most meaningful when it is apparently hidden, when it's apparently absent. The core of this teaching is Rebbe Nachman's spin of a verse from the liturgy, which we say, Aye Mekom Kevodo. Where is the place of his glory? Where is the place of his glory? But Rabbi Nachman takes this phrase not as a question, but as a declaration. Aye, where? When we call out to God and we ask, where are you? This itself is where his glorious presence resides. Aye, when we say where, this is Mekom Kevodo. This is the place of his glory. And here, Rabbi Nachman develops one of his most well-known ideas, which is that you can have a descent for the purpose of ascending. He writes, even if you fall into doubts, and there are people who sink very low indeed, and even have questions about God himself, even so, the whole purpose of their descent is so that they should later rise up. The truth is that in life, you often have to fail before you can move up. If you want to jump over a fence, you cannot stand right in front of the fence and jump over it. You've got to take some steps back. Then you could move forward to jump over the fence. And Rabbi Nachman teaches this idea frequently. Rabbi Nachman's teachings repeatedly encourage us to never give up and to always have faith that things can get better. He stressed the importance of optimism and having a positive attitude always. We see this many times in his teachings, where he urges us to always look for the good points in others and in ourselves. In Likutei Moharan, Part 2, Chapter 17, Rabbi Nachman writes, God's way is to focus on the good, even if there are things that aren't so good. He looks only for the good. How much more do we have to avoid focusing on the faults of our friends? We are obligated to seek only the good, always. And in Likutei Moharan, Part 1, Chapter 282, Rebbe Nachman stresses the importance of judging all people favorably. Even when someone is a complete sinner, we should search until we find some modicum of good. There must be something good that this person has done even once in their life. And Rabbi Nachman urges us to search for that good point about even the worst people. And when we do that, when we find some good, by virtue of that good, the person is no longer a complete sinner. By finding this small point of good and judging the person favorably, we actually elevate. We have the ability to elevate others from a position of guilt to one of merit. When we look for the good in ourselves and we focus on that good and we highlight it, Rabbi Nachman says that we can turn even depression into joy.